Good morning, guys. This is the first demo video I'm going to attempt to do. I hope you guys are doing well at home. It feels pretty weird here being without you guys. It is quiet though. I have this whole bakery to myself, which is super fun. So I'm going to attempt to do about 4 to 5 different things here, and I'm going to show you guys how to do the makeup and some of the frying with the real fryer, okay? Fluid system's coming on. And all this is done in one take, okay? So please bear with me. It's gonna be a little goofy and some of it might take a minute to get started, but I should have everything prepped up, ready to go to give you guys a pretty good idea of how to do a couple different things. We're gonna do yeast donuts, we're gonna do cake donuts, I'm gonna do cannoli shells, I'm gonna fill them, fritters, simple fritters, and I'm gonna try to pull off a funnel cake and apple fritters on top of that. So, before we get started understanding the fryer here, typically you're going to be running a fryer at about 365 to 375. The oil selection is important because there's a flavor in the oil, right? The different oil consistencies, different types of oil that are going to be healthier for you or possibly not as healthy. So picking the right type of oil as well as the temperature is very important. If your temperature is too low, it's going to take longer for those items to fry. It's going to need more time for it to absorb the oil, and now it's getting soggy rather than crispy and light and fluffy. Whereas too high of a temperature, it's going to crisp and burn the outside quicker, and the inside is still going to be light and doughy, undercooked. So you need to make sure that you get your temperature in your fryer just right so you have those products come out correctly, okay? The first one that I'm going to play with here is a yeast donut. Yeast raised donut, okay? Now, yeast raised donut, just like any of the other lean or rich yeast doughs, we're developing a dough. We are forming a dough, we're developing the dough, and we're developing the gluten. Just like any other yeast dough you guys have been used to using, you are going to mix that dough, straight dough method probably, depending on what the recipe is, and then bulk fermentation, right? We let it sit and we just let it proof and relax. Then I can go ahead and shape it up. Now, this recipe is actually your croissant recipe. It's not the rolled in butter. You don't have to worry about the sheet of butter anymore, but if you have that croissant recipe, you can just make the dough, just the bread dough without that rolled in butter on the bottom. That's that 560 grams at the bottom. You still need the 4 ounces of fat of butter in the dough, but the roll in butter at the bottom doesn't have to be applied to this recipe because all we want is the dough for donuts, okay? This dough makes an excellent donut product. And very simply, just like we did all the other breads, you're going to make it up and form the dough, bulk ferment. I chill it, just like I do the croissants. I chill this overnight as best as I can so that it stiffens up pretty well. So that when I go to roll it out, I don't have a whole lot of issues rolling it out. You know this dough already, that croissant dough, it's a great consistency. You really don't even need a whole lot of flour on the table. So remember, yeast donuts, just like those yeast doughs, very simple to use, very simple to make, and very simple to work with, okay? For donuts, we need a circle shape, right? And a circle cut out of the center. So I'm using a 90 and a 40 round cutters, and that will be able to cut those donuts out pretty well for me. We need to make sure that we do roll this out to the right thickness. The thickness dictates the thickness of the end product of the donut, right? Realizing your yeast products are going to rise, so you want to go a little bit thinner than the dough nut was going to be at the very end, okay? So we're going to roll this out a little bit. We're looking, it's right between a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch on the thickness, and you got to kind of get a feel for it. I think I've already put a batch in the proofer to try to speed us up a little bit. I think I might have rolled that one out a little bit too thin, so we're going to take a peek and hopefully we'll see the difference. I'm going to keep this one a little bit thicker. Just like the croissant dough, roll that bad boy out. Even thickness, try to make sure that it's not thicker in the center. Be moving all that dough out to the edges so that the thickness stays consistent. Keep going. Delty, make sure you're waking up back there. Just a little joke. I miss you guys. I'm not gonna lie. I miss you guys. Okay. So, I got a pretty decent thickness right now. It's a little thinner than a 1/2 inch. And I don't want to go much thinner, so I'm actually gonna leave it right there. Just like doing any other circle rounds that we cut out, realizing rounds there's more of waste. We are going to use that waste, but with donuts, you can always usually find a way to use up the waste. Try to make sure that you're cutting as close as possible together to minimize that waste, right? So hopefully you guys should be able to see this, but I'm going to start cutting out circles. Boom. Keep them close together. And this can be as big or small as you want it. It's gonna be dictated how big of a donut do you want, how small of a donut do you want, okay? Right there you can already see, boom, I got waste. And I don't like to rework this dough. Biscuit dough is such a light, fluffy dough that reworking it doesn't even form that much gluten. You can rework it once. This, you rework it, it is gonna start to form gluten. So I suggest trying to find something else to do with these wastes so that you don't have to rework it back into the dough, and I'm gonna show you something to do with that. These wastes, it's a little bit of extra leftovers that I had from the last batch. Hold on to those from the side. We're gonna play with that. Now, donuts typically have a circle cut out the center, right? That's to help evenly cook the donut throughout the frying process. Otherwise, the center theoretically is gonna be a little bit undercooked. However, you realize there are such things as jelly-filled, cream-filled donuts, right? So if I want a filled donut, I just don't cut the circle out. Very simple. Boom, I'm gonna make 2 more. I'll just do 1 more. I have a couple already ready to go for filled donuts in there. So 1 more is gonna be a filled donut. The rest of these bad boys are gonna be just normal donuts. Okay, so yeast donuts, the makeup, same as all those other yeast doughs that you've ever done. The actual dough formation makeup, the actual makeup of the shape of the donut, also very similar to that yeast dough. Very, very simple. It's a great dough, so you don't need a lot of flour, rolling it out to the right thickness and then cutting it out. Now we have all of our donut shapes. Boom. We're gonna put them on the tray because we have to proof, right? It is a yeast dough. So before that last cooking stage, whether it is going in the oven or whether it's hitting the fryer, it has to proof 1 more time before it does the final cooking process. It is a yeast dough. It's too dense right now. We need it to rise to get nice and light and fluffy. What do we have here in the center? Obviously, we have donut holes. Now, a lot of the times back when I used to do donuts, I would actually save these and fry them up and toss them very quickly in simple cinnamon sugar. I'm gonna show you how to do that for a couple of them. For all these right here, I'm actually gonna throw in my waste pile, and I'm gonna use that up for the apple fritters. I'm gonna show you how to use up some of those wastes. So right now, we have our yeast donuts ready to go, and boom, proofer. We're going to the proofer, so I'll be right back. And my other tray of donuts looks like it needs just a little bit longer proofing there, so once those get ready to go, I'm gonna show you how to fry those. Real quick, let's do the apple fritters. This is a really, really fun, easy recipe. And there's really no real written recipe for it. If you watch that video that I posted, the donuts with Sugo in his bakery, he was the one that I kind of learned how to do the apple fritters from him. They come out amazing, but more than anything, it's eyeballing. It's kind of like making meatloaf. You just kind of throw everything together, make a big, mashed, mushy mess, and then form it up on your trays, okay? Get me a little tray ready to go here. So like you saw in his video, he had a apple concoction ready to go, and he mixed it with the scraps from the yeast donuts, okay? These are still a yeast dough, so we need to understand what that is. And this, if you want to understand, very simply, all I did was took fresh apples, diced them up, peeled and cored, and then I sauteed them in butter and cinnamon sugar. A little bit of brown sugar in I think there as well, but it's a nice sweetened, cooked apple concoction with a little bit of a syrup content. We want a little bit more of that sugar, a little bit of moisture to add into it. So you kind of have to eyeball it. I can see here I have that much dough scrap, so I'm going to put about an even amount of this apple concoction down. Then, if you remember what seen his video, what did he do next? He just took a big random amount of flour and added it into the concoction, right? So that's what we're gonna do. It's really, really easy. The thing is, add more flour until it gets at least easy enough to work with. This is meant to be a tackier product. By the end, when you form it up, it is going to be tackier, but realize you can add flour until it at least is easy enough to work with. So, just like you did in the video, get in there. Yeah, buddy. And if for some reason you're seeing and you're like, I like more apples in my apple fritters, add some more apples. Like, seriously guys, you are the chef. Make some decisions. There's no real recipe to this. Just kind of throw some stuff together and make a big mess. I will tell you, these are the most professional looking apple fritters I've ever made. So, I do suggest stealing this recipe. As you mash all this stuff together, the moisture comes out of the apples and starts to reincorporate into the floury and dough mixture. And essentially what it makes, in my opinion, resembles meatloaf. If it was an appley, doughy meatloaf. I really wish you guys had been here for this week too, because this is one of the most fun things to do. Still kind of wet and tacky, so I'm going to add a little bit more flour to it. Try to bring it together. Pretty close now. The apples have combined with that dough. I've broken down the dough into a bunch of tiny, tiny little pieces. If you see any bigger chunks of dough still in there, try to cut those up. All right, I think I'm gonna stop there. It's pretty good. We got this really wet, nasty looking mixture. I'm gonna add a little bit more flour. I'm gonna reincorporate some of this flour just a little bit to try to dry it out. And then we're going to try to form it into actually a log, as if we were making meatloaf. Okay, starting to get pretty good there. I'm gonna start forming it to a log. Not too bad too, it's actually not too tacky. It's starting to get a little tackier the more I work it, right? Just like anything else, the flour incorporates more and more into the moisture, into the liquid of the dough. So for this, you actually flour the outside a little bit, roll it over, flour the outside, and that's just to keep it from sticking to the table, so you can kind of work with it a little bit easier. Once you get a good log going, now we're making hamburger patties. It's hilarious, but that's the best way I can describe it. I'll take a chunk off right here. Take this bad boy. I'm gonna get like an oval hamburger patty going. Nice and flat, not too paper thin, but flat enough like a donut. It has to rise again. This is a yeast dough. Once again, we use yeast dough, so before it gets to the fryer, we gotta fry it again. So I'm forming it into patties, putting it onto a sheet tray, and then I'm gonna proof it and fry it. If your dough is too tacky when you're putting it down, add a little bit of flour to it, realizing once it proofs, it's going to get even more tacky. So you got to be able to get it up off the parchment paper. If you're having issues because it's sticking too much to the parchment paper, then maybe I would use a floured tray. I wouldn't even do parchment paper. That's gonna be up to you. These are some things that you guys are just gonna figure out on your own when you run your own bakery. How do you like to do it? What's easier for you? We're gonna keep going. This looks really good. I'm gonna try to get these proofed up quickly enough so we can see them fried. These are big ones. Holy cow, these are big ones. I'm gonna get these into the proof room and check my yeast donuts real quick, and then we might jump over to cake donuts. Give me 1 second. Yeast donuts need 1 more minute. This technically is a lean yeast dough, but because it's a donut and realizing like an oven, with an oven spring, your fryer has kind of like a fry spring to it. When your products hit that oil, that hot oil, it's still gonna rise a little bit. So we actually want to underproof these donuts just a hair for that reason, and so that it's not too fragile, so that we can easily get it up off that tray and into the fryer. We're gonna underproof just a little bit. And that's the fun part about the yeast donuts. If you have the recipe for the croissants out in front of you, you can see how easy it is. Now, what I suggest is get your book out and look at the page for cake donuts. For the cake donuts, it should be in that chapter 11, the fry week that we have going on right now. Cake donuts. Now, cake donuts resemble more of a cake batter, a cake consistency. The main difference being, it is not a yeast dough. The cake donuts recipe in your book is a creaming method, creaming together shortening, sugar, some salt, dry milk solids, and then you're bringing the rest of the ingredients together. The leavening agent in the cake donuts is baking powder. So, unlike yeast donuts, I don't have to wait for them to rise. These can be made very, very quickly. Just realizing the cake donuts are a very, very light, tacky batter. More than anything, the makeup is the more difficult part. You don't have to wait for the rise. The method used to actually make the dough is a lot simpler, but the dough itself is tackier and harder to form. So the suggestion is you freeze or chill your dough for 20 to 30 minutes, so to bring it back together, a lot like those Danish pastries or those really wet cookie doughs that we were doing. And then just like your scones and biscuits, you're gonna use a ton of flour. Put tons of flour down on the table, tons of flour down on top, and very simply just get it down to the consistency that you want and cut out your shapes. I also used the 90 and the 40 just like the yeast donuts, and I got a pretty decent shape. You don't want them too thick, but you actually want them a little bit thicker than the yeast donuts. The yeast donuts are gonna rise a lot more than these will. These are just relying on that baking powder, so you have to make sure that you make the recipe correctly with the right amount of baking powder, and you have to make sure that you cut them into the right thickness, the right size, so that when they do fry, they're not too fat to where the inside is gonna be doughy and undercooked, or they're not too thin to where it's gonna cook too quickly and it's gonna become brittle and crispy, where it should be a nice, light, fluffy cake donut, right? So these, I went ahead and already made up for you guys. They're really, really simple. Once again, creaming method. The recipe is right there in your book. You should be looking at it. And the makeup, really, really simple. Just getting it out on the table. Tons of flour like the scones and our biscuits. And try to get them to the right thickness quickly with your hands, just lightly, and cut them out. Once they are cut out made up into the right shapes, no rising like the yeast dough, it's all ready to go. We can go ahead and drop it right into the fryer. So I think we got another minute on our yeast donuts. We're gonna go ahead and fry these. And I'm gonna grab the camera and bring it over here. Okay, so we can see my cake donuts right here. Beautiful, beautiful. Now I'm gonna teach you a little bit of etiquette with the fryer, okay? You got 2 baskets here, and at the bottom of your fryer, you can actually see it right there. There's a grate. So really, if you drop something in there, most things should float in the fryer. But if it doesn't, there's a grate there to catch it. Remember, most things float in the fryer. So if something is done or it's been in there for a while and it's floating, that means it's usually done. Floating or a nice golden brown is an indication that a product is done in the fryer, okay? Now, once again, you gotta realize what products you're doing in the fryer. How do I wanna use my fryer? And I'm gonna explain that right now. There's a couple different ways you can play with this. One, a fryer, it's a big vat with oil. I could drop things right down into my oil right here. But because this is a relatively kind of a fragile dough, and I don't wanna make a big mess, this is when the baskets do come in handy, okay? And you have 2 baskets, do you have to fill them both up? No, you can kind of use them together. So, for example, what I suggest for these is I'm actually gonna drop my basket in first, I'm gonna grab my donuts off the paper, and then I'm gonna lightly put them into the oil. Drop them in, one more into the oil, boom. And now, you see how I'm dropping the donuts into the fryer. I put them with the front side facing towards me, and then the back side is the side that I lay towards the back of the fryer. For one very important reason, if it splashes up at you and you drop it this way towards you, the oil is splashing onto you. It's hot oil. You want to always lay things to the back of the fryer so that it splashes towards the back. Now, if you have something that needs to be submerged more so, and it tends to float a lot, that's when you're going to what we call sandwich the basket. So now I have the donuts in there and they're being forced under the oil by that second basket. Depending on what items you're doing, you might leave it in there the whole time, or for these cake donuts, I actually like to just start them that way, and then I'll unsandwich them and let them kind of finish up on their own. Because like that one right there, if they get covered up, that one's not gonna fry as evenly as this one will because it's touching the oil fully. So you kind of wanna move things around a little bit. But you can already see we're getting a nice golden brown on the tops of those bad boys. The entire donut should have been frying under the oil, right? So theoretically, the whole thing should be at about the same cooking rate, but you always wanna check. If the bottom's getting a little bit more done, you wanna flip them over. So right now, I just looked at it, the bottom was a little more brown. The top's not too bad, but I want to go a little bit further on that, so I'm going to flip them. Now, they really don't take a lot of time, guys. Yeast or cake donuts in the fryer, they do not take a lot of time. Once you start to see golden brown and frying, you just want to make sure that they're fully cooked all the way through, okay? Most things in the fryer really only take 3 to 4 minutes, especially in the baking and pastry industry. If you start frying whole turkeys and pieces of fish and chicken, then it's going to take a little bit longer, okay? Those bad boys are almost about done there. I'm gonna submerge them one more time. I like to do this in short bursts for these cake donuts just to make sure that that inside is fully cooked. I really hate, you know how much I hate raw dough, so raw cake batter in the middle of a cake donut's even worse, right? So I'm just giving them another little second there to go. And then we're gonna pull them out. They look really, really good. Okay. Once they are done, I suggest, especially if you're using your basket, if you're not, then it's gonna be a little trickier, but if you're using your basket for these, boom, go ahead and hang your basket right up top here. There's a little lip to hang it in. And my old school trick that I've been doing ever since I've worked in a restaurant, you hang the basket and then you just kind of hit the basket up and down a few times. It just lets all that oil drip out. You'll see, I'm gonna explain it now. I was gonna explain it a little bit later when we did yeast donuts, but you'll see in a lot of videos, a lot of people that do donuts, they have a cake rack to allow their donuts to sit and kind of drip and dry a little bit so that that oil doesn't soak into the donuts. In my opinion, if you do a donut properly and you just let them hang out for a second there in the basket, by the time you drop them out of there, there shouldn't be a whole lot of oil anyway. So I do them so quickly, and I usually garnish them and then start selling them so quickly that I don't even waste my time with the cake rack. So you can see there, I already see some really, really great products. And here, I actually fried the rest of the donuts earlier, so I have a decent amount of cake donuts to play with you guys. Show you how to garnish them up, and I'm gonna do that. Sorry, I'm trying to control the camera at the same time. I'm gonna do that in a minute once we get the other donuts ready to go. So we're gonna put these bad boys right here. And then let's check on our yeast donuts. I'm gonna bring you guys with me for a second. Let's check on these bad boys. Don't you miss the bakery? Okay, so those yeast donuts there still could use a little bit more rise on them. Realizing, like I said, underproofed, so I feel them. Make sure that you're feeling your donuts. If they're light and fluffy, they're usually ready to go. These are still a little thick and dense, so we give them a little bit longer, and I think I'm gonna crank my heat and humidity up a little bit on this bad boy. Okay, let's give them a little bit longer, and then let's jump over to cannolis. Cannolis. Set you guys back up here. Okay. Oh, that's fantastic. Come on, work with me. It's a learning curve, guys. Whew. Much rather teach you guys in this kitchen. Okay, so now we're gonna do cannolis. Cannolis are a traditional fried Italian dessert, okay? Fried meaning the shell is fried. The filling is obviously not fried, but it is a traditional Italian dessert and is very, very simple to make. This is a dough, just like any other dough you've ever made. It doesn't have yeast. It doesn't have a high sugar content. It has a Marsala wine, so it has an alcohol content in it that attributes to the bubbling texture. But more than anything, that correct texture is going to be coming from the thickness of this dough. And that's the hardest part with cannolis. Most people keep them way too thick when they fry. To get the proper texture of a good cannoli, you have to get this dough so thin to the point where you can almost see through it like tissue paper. That's where you really start to see the good consistency of the cannoli. I fried a few already here, and you can see the difference in the consistencies. Try to give you a good example. This one right here, I went really thin with it, and that's where you can see the nice, light, thin, crispy, yet bubbly texture on the outside. This one, I think this one right here. This is one of my thicker ones. So you can see there, see how thick that dough is? Where you really want a light, thin, crispy dough, and the bubbles on the outside, you just don't have as many light and bubbly, that texture that you want to see from the cannoli shells, okay? So that's really dictated by the amount of alcohol that you have in it and the thickness of the dough that you've rolled. So you've got to make sure that you roll this dough out really, really thin, and then attach it to your cannoli pins. Now, I do suggest using professional, real cannoli pins. I ordered them for you guys in the bakery here. Those little metal dowels that we use to do the twirls, they'll work if you're in a pinch, but to get the really clean, nice cannoli shapes, you really want to use cannoli pins, and you want to cut it with a circle cutter and try to keep that circle shape as you're rolling it around your pin, okay? So if you can, get this dough really thin before you cut it out. Stick it a little bit. There we go. It's a really nice dough too. It sticks a little bit, but you can usually still get it up. Get it back up off the table, which is what I like. Okay, look how thin that dough is. And honestly, I would even go a little bit thinner, but it's retracting on me too much now. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut a couple of these and show you how to attach them to the pin. When you have a dough like this and it starts retracting and you keep trying to get it thinner, when you cut one of these and you put a really good twist on it, that dough is gonna instantly start retracting in. So you kind of gotta counteract that a little bit, especially because they're cannolis. We need to get them as thin as possible, okay? Now, I got some good shapes there, but they're retracting in. They're getting a little bit thicker, so I'm gonna play with them. These are your cannoli pins right here, and they have a very specific shape for a reason. If it was like those dowels that we had over there, those dowels are thicker on one end and thinner on one end, so you get this kind of wonky, lopsided cannoli shell. These are angled perfectly on the edges right here, and they're not sealed for the reason of the cannoli shell sometimes sticks, so you can kind of crunch this in a little bit. It'll break from the outer shell, and you'll be able to slip it out cleanly without damaging your cannoli shell. And that's really the name of the game with these bad boys. So once I have these circles cut out like this, remember I'm saying paper thin. So if I see that that circle retracted a little bit on me and it's not thin enough, I'm gonna grab a little rolling pin and I'm gonna kind of help that circle out. Get it just a little bit thinner. And then the key to all good cannoli shells, egg wash. You need to make sure that you egg wash it around the cannoli pin. So you take your pin, roll up that dough, a little egg wash on the end, bring it over and seal it up. And you can push down a little bit right there and seal that seam up, but once you have it good to go like that, boom, done. I'm just gonna do 2 more of these to show you guys how to do them. stick. Come on. I don't really want to do a whole bunch more of these. I'm trying to show you guys. So you get the idea. I'm going to throw the rest of that away. Once we have them ready to go, sealed up, boom. They can go right in the fryer. They are not a yeast. All in one take, right? Woo. Okay. Not a yeast dough product, right? So we do not have to wait. We do not have to have these to rise. We can go right into the fryer, okay? Once again, grab the camera, bring you guys over here with me. And boom, now we're looking at the fryer. For these bad boys, I like to use the baskets just to make my life a little bit easier so I don't have to go hunting for them. So I'll drop both cannoli shells in the pins. You keep them in the cannoli pins and boom. Go ahead and drop those bad boys down. They will sink at first. Sometimes I'll sandwich them. You just want to make sure that it's fully submerged and it's getting cooked evenly. Things float. Think about it. If something's floating in the fryer, only half of it's cooking, right? Whatever's floating above that oil isn't really cooking. So things have to be turned. A cannoli pin is not easy to turn. It's going to keep rolling and rolling. It's not like a donut. So in my opinion, sometimes sandwiching things like these is going to make your life a little bit easier. We're going to let those get started there. I'm going to give those a second, then you're going to walk with me over here. We're going to go get the cannoli filling. Look how empty it is. Nobody's here. Okay, cannoli filling. I already went and made this up. And then let's check on these bad boys. They really don't take a whole long time, but they need a little bit longer, I think. Nice golden brown we're looking for, right? So I can already see that nice bubbly texture, but they're still a little light colored. So we're gonna let them go just a little bit longer. If things are starting to stick to your basket, that's why you'll see I'll shake the basket all the time. I do not want things to stick to the basket. If they stick, it's gonna be harder to get them up, and you can see in that one there's a little bit of burnt something on there. It's harder to clean too if things stick to that basket. Proper fritter batters, proper doughs and things like that should be sturdy enough to hold up in the fryer. If they're not, you're gonna find out very, very quickly. They usually fall apart and break up and create a huge mess in your fryer within the first 30 seconds. Proper fryer care. This oil needs to be constantly maintained. If the oil gets dirty, if the oil gets overheated, burnt, you're gonna get a bad flavor. You're going to get a bad consistency. It's not gonna fry correctly. You're possibly gonna get a darker color on things that aren't even done yet. So you're thinking they're done, but you're pulling them out. They look almost burnt, but they're doughy in the center. Proper fryer maintenance is huge. Making sure that you're cleaning that out and staying on top of your oil. But look at those bad boys. Those look delicious. Okay. I like to use these little cardboard bowls in a real restaurant. If you're doing a lot of fry things, they usually have these little cardboard baskets to put fried foods in. The oil gets absorbed right into the basket. That's why I like to use these. You do not have to take them right off the pins when they're hot. You can, but they come off when they're cooled too. So if you let them fully cool down, then you'll be able to slide those right out of those pins, and boom, you're gonna have beautiful, beautiful cannoli shells. So my yeast donuts are still taking a little bit more time, so I'm gonna go ahead and fill these cannoli shells.